This is Tony Poulos and I'm at TM Forum Live in Nice. Two of today's keynote speakers are right here with me today. I have on my right Nicholas Heller, ex-Google, now at Fractal Labs, and Adrian Cockcroft, now at Battery Ventures, previously at Netflix and other companies. Gentlemen, great to have you both here. Both very controversial characters in your own right. Putting you together on one panel must have been rather an interesting session, but I missed it. So you're going to have to tell me all about the things you discussed. Firstly, rewiring the box was the topic of conversation. What's that all about? What do you mean by rewiring the box? Go ahead, Nick.
Well, I think what it was implying was digital native businesses versus traditional businesses, maybe pre-internet, and the difference between the two. So how can you rewire a more traditional business that already spent their childhood and adolescence before the internet arrived, and how they're being disrupted by the millennials, the millennial businesses, the businesses that were just born in the last 15 years when the commercial internet took hold, 20 years now, I suppose. And so what are the differences in structure and culture and process and thinking and management style? So we tried to explore those topics in more detail, and I think one of the critical points that came out were, follow the user, because the user is in charge of your business. Have a culture that accepts risk, and really use data to make better decisions, at least from my side. What do you think, Adrian?
Yeah, Adrian, you and I are what he was talking about. We've come from those times, pre-internet, and I thought it was a pretty good time. What's different now?
I think everything, like if you go to a company and say, would you like your products to take longer to get to market? They're not so happy about that. But then they don't necessarily optimize to get your products to go faster. So the digital businesses, the web scale companies, everything is optimized around getting ideas to market quickly. You have an idea, you have a hypothesis. How fast can you get the idea developed into a thing that's testable, see what the customer likes, and get it back in? Right, in a typical large company deployment, it's a year maybe. If you're doing agile, maybe it's down to a few months. In Netflix, it's probably a week. Maybe if you can do some things, try it out faster than that. You're doing lots of independent deployments a day because the developers and the product managers are working together, and the developers deploy the idea as an individual feature. And that's it. There's no handoffs, there's no applying, writing a ticket to get a VM and waiting 60 days for it to be provisioned.
Yeah.
No, you just go, I need 500 machines. Sure, that's what 10 minutes. What's your next problem? Right.
Well, you're talking today about changing customers' perspectives, but the issue here is that the customer has their own perspectives. Are we having to change the business models to suit the customer perspectives? Is that more what it's about now?
I think the business models adapt based on customer need, but the good thing about today's customers is you can get real-time feedback. Actually, I think one of the advantages that digital native companies have is that their cost base is lower, and they're better at communicating with the customer, so the feedback loop is more immediate. And then you can make changes on the fly and be more flexible in your structure and in your product development. So I think the customer is in charge, and maybe more in charge now than ever before, and you will know very quickly if they're not happy with your service or your product. And being able to ascertain all those data points from your customer segment, or your maybe your new customer segment or your existing one, and combine that with other data points that you have internally, then you start making decisions in real time. And if the processes are there, like Adrian said, that the head at Netflix, you're able to actually quickly change course. I think in the entrepreneurial world they call it pivoting, but all that really means is changing course in some
very quickly. But new digital services companies, and particularly the new players in the field, are they really making sure of all those things before they start off, or are they just jumping straight in and then learning as they go along? I can't believe that digital service providers are that well informed or that well process driven.
Well, everything's provided as a service now.
Yes.
I mean, that's the real change. Instead of making software and shipping it and installing it, it's now everything's provided as a service. I mean, in the startup world, if you come through and you're saying, well, I want to make a piece of hardware, or I want to do that, it's a difficult to do business model compared to you've got a competitor that's providing it, just as a standalone service, somebody trivially signs up, you can try it for free, basically no cost, and you cycle through that. So but the thing about telcos are services. So you should be good at doing this already. The problem is that you have built services that take a long time to deploy. By the time you've deployed it, the guy who had the idea doesn't even work there anymore. So you've got to shorten the cycle time and build in metrics and close that loop. And if you close that loop and you're actually, how much can you learn from each product feature you're pushing out? That's the driving metric.
And there's a lot of risk involved with that, and risk is not a great thing for communication service providers to handle. They tend to avoid it.
The risk is that you're running at a 1 year product cycle and your competitor's running at 1 week. That's a bigger risk.
That's a much bigger risk, You're right. Which leads me to the point about virtualization. You talk about virtualization today. It seems that everything is being virtualized. What does that actually mean in terms of the customer at the end of the cycle? Is it the industry's virtualizing, the technology, the IT virtualizing, or are we virtualizing the whole environment now in the ecosystem?
I think the whole environment is being virtualized. I think that services are all moving to the cloud, and actually all you need is connectivity. And so devices or gadgets are only around you to be connected. The hard computing problems are being solved in the cloud. So everything is virtual, and it's really about understanding customer behavior and offering them a service that takes away some of the problems, takes away the hassle, and really gives them value. So all the hard computing problems and storage problems are taken care of in the background. Connectivity is taken care of. You're taking care of the basics and then providing a great service on top. So I would say everything is virtualized.
So our industry, the communication service providers, are providing that connectivity. Is that all they should be doing? Do you think they should just concentrate on that as the critical component, or should they be entering the digital service as well and providing all these new services as well, which they're trying to do? Any advice for them?
Some of them obviously are, right? They're through recent acquisitions, and you've got things like Verizon, Terramark, AT&T and DirecTV. So yeah, you can see that the telco industries are broadening. Somebody has to own the fiber in the ground and the connections to it and make sure the bandwidth's there. But the people building applications nowadays don't even think about that. The people that built Snapchat, I don't think they have any knowledge of telecoms. They wouldn't need to, right? But they built an enormously high-end system using Google App Engine and Google Backend to go build that. It's one of the biggest apps running on the Google Cloud. But there's no telecom infrastructure in that. It's just doing whatever 400 million photos a day are being uploaded into it.
Yeah. But for Netflix, the model is quite different. It's critical for good communications for their customers to get streaming video.
So Netflix is a little different in that if you can run on the cloud until you outgrow it. Right? If your application is bigger than the biggest cloud you can find, so you couldn't run Google on AWS because Google is bigger, Google's itself is bigger,
yes.
And it turns out that the Netflix CDN is bigger than the commercial CDNs in bandwidth, and it's a very simple problem, so it made sense for them to own their own CDN, which is now, I think the last number was 34% of US delivered bits to houses is Netflix, and growing pretty substantially. So
it's a really interesting
They
model.
had to build something that was capable of doing that very extreme thing. But that's a tiny team of people. There's a few tens of people built that and run that entire CDN infrastructure, and it's a large number of terabits of traffic. It's quite interesting.
Well, partially because you're outsourcing a lot of the heavy lifting to AWS.
Yes.
All the control plane, all the management of that CDN is on AWS.
Yes.
There's some interesting talks, detailed talks at Streaming Media West or East, I forget, recently.
Well, I'm getting the feeling I'm going to be virtualized shortly if we don't end up this conversation. Thank you both very much, Nick and Adrian, for being with us today and for coming along to TM Forum's live event in Nice.
Thank
Enjoy.
You, Thank you.
Yeah.